after every time you determine that somebody's a convicted felon or disqualified for mental health reasons or whatever, then you do an investigation to see whether or not to.
What we do is and the gun center rep is here, I'll let him get into detail, but MSP does it, for the sake, let's use an example. You come in to get an HQL. You fill out the form, you heard people talk about mistakes on the form, let's assume you do the form correctly, you put it in, there's a mental health hit. MSP will notify you that there is a mental health prohibitor and that you are prohibited from getting a firearm. Now remember, under Firearm Safety Act 281, we did create a measure for you to appeal that through the DHMH process. Having said that, once we see the mental health prohibitor, it is sent over to the gun center and the firearms investigation unit to look at you further. Do you have any guns? Do you have any shotguns? Do you have anything registered to you? Do you have anything that's could be in your possession? Because right now, you're now a prohibited person. Investigation is then done, and then if you are found to be prohibited, your guns will be asked to be forfeited or we'll come get them, however that works out. And they can address the specifics. And that's for everybody who is prohibited. So that's a mental health prohibitor. You also know that under Maryland law, juvenile records, if you have a prohibiting conviction as a juvenile, you cannot come back and try to purchase a firearm until age 30 or older. If, for the sake of argument, you come in at 25 and maybe you did an armed robbery as a juvenile, you are prohibited. Now, MSP does have access to those records. Other law enforcement entities do not. They're not going to have ready access to that. MSP will perform the investigation if we find out, in fact, you have a prohibitor. We will do a criminal investigation. Again, we will look at everything. Who you are, where you are, why you applied the application, what did you supply, we'll pull all the necessary records. Then we're also going to check to see if by chance you have any firearms. Again, because you're prohibited, we're going to make sure you don't have them in your possession. So yes, we already perform.
But your main objective there is to secure the fact that they have no access to guns, but you're not interested in prosecution.
No, that's not true.
Oh.
That's not true.
Oh, you are interested in prosecution?
Absolutely.
I see.
Absolutely.
So,
and I believe we provided you with some numbers from 2015, or at least a member of the staff, of what some of the investigations were, and we are interested in having prosecution. We work, the Attorney General for the state of Maryland has provided us some guidance on what cases should be sent for prosecution, which cases shouldn't. And there are thresholds to meet for a criminal prosecution. Steve Kroll is here, as we've also worked out with the State's Attorneys Association to have their folks look at our stuff, again, for prosecution. So we're looking at everything here, which is why the bill, you're trying to divert everything over to other folks. And what we're saying is, look, we're a one-stop shop, which you, the General Assembly, have funded. And you've made sure we have these tools in place to investigate, research, and if necessary, prosecute for the false application, perjury, or any number of things that could be there. Or we make sure that if you do have a firearm and you're prohibited, that we get that firearm away from you.
Okay, terrific. So should we hear the testimony from Steve?
Absolutely, sir. I'm sorry if there are any more questions.
I'm not seeing any other ones. Thank you, Tom. That's very helpful. And so we want to go to you.
Well, Frank Lopez from the Gun Center could probably address it.
Lopez, why don't you go?
You want to go, Frank?
Okay. Senator, members,
Stand up and go from the top there.
senators, and yes. So at the Maryland Gun Center, we receive the disapprovals from our licensing division. At that point, as Tom said, we review it, and there was criteria that was developed. For many years, the Maryland Attorney General investigated and prosecuted false applications. Okay, so they would do the workup. They did it for about 10 years. Recently, as of July, they stopped doing it, and it was returned back to us. And what we do is, based on the criteria that they developed, we started doing these investigations and then presenting them to the local state's attorneys for prosecution.
So are there any you decide should not be prosecuted? I mean,
Well,
are you just looking for knowing and willful misstatements? Is that one of the screens?
Yes. So the criteria that was developed was all crimes of violence, regardless of the time frame, all final protective orders, and then any disqualifying crimes that occurred within the last 2 years. So if we see anything that meets that criteria, we conduct an investigation, and we get a certified copy of the conviction, and then we present those facts to the local state's attorney's office for prosecution.
Gotcha. And what do we know generally what percentage in a year of the denials would be turned over for prosecution?
I don't have those figures. I've requested that information from the Attorney General's
I mean, do you have a
office.
general sense? Are we talking the vast majority or a small minority or half or?
Well, last year, the state police, we had 736 disapprovals. 255 were administrative, where someone said that they were under 21 when they weren't, stuff like that, not necessarily a criminal. Then we were left with 396 disapprovals that involved some sort of disqualification, being it a state prohibitor, federal prohibitor, a felony or misdemeanor, mental health, warrants, a fugitive from justice, whatever it might be. So those are the stats that I have as far as the disapprovals.
And then those 396 were then referred for prosecution?
They were not all referred for prosecution, no. The number, like I said, in July, the Maryland Attorney General, who had been doing it for 10 years, stopped. They did not have any for 2015. We picked up July 1st, and we referred two for prosecution. One was prosecuted and convicted. The other was declined to prosecute. That was based on the criteria that we had.
Just to be clear about that, you're saying there were one or two out of that volume of 400 that
There
were?
was two, yes.
There were two out of the 400 that were brought. So is the general policy not to prosecute?
No,
Oh.
it's not.
I'm sorry, yes, it is that policy, or no, it's not the policy?
No, it's not the policy, sir.
So in other words, there were specific reasons in each of those cases not to bring a prosecution?
Well, again, we were basing on the criteria. So I assumed command in January of this year, and we're in the process with the State's Attorney Association to refine the policy so that there's no, there's nothing that falls off.
Okay, all right, but you've got no problem with what Tom testified to as to the referral to local law enforcement, to local state's attorneys in these cases?
I agree with Tom's
Okay,
position, yes.
all right, thank you very much. I'm going to turn back over to the real chair now.
Yes, sir.
These numbers, there was some confusion. The 396, that was for all of 2015.
Yes,
And you don't know what the Attorney General did from January 2015 up to July 2015.
that's correct, sir.
All right, so the only number, you said two, that's
Well, I
only-
do know they didn't prosecute any.
The Attorney General didn't prosecute any of those, okay? And then after
But I don't know
that-
how many were in that time frame.
I'm sorry?
Of the 396,
Right,
I don't know how many of those fell within that time frame.
okay. So the two that you know about were the ones that you picked up since July.
Yes, sir.
So it's not two of 396, it's two of what you know about, which is since you came into since the state MSP picked up reassumed the responsibility for referring these for prosecution.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Little, okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
ladies and gentlemen of the committee,
Good to
good
see you.
afternoon, good evening, rather. I'm Stephen Kroll, the State's Attorney Coordinator for Maryland, Executive Director of the Maryland State's Attorneys Association, and we are asking for an amendment as to Senate Bill 944. To go over with Senator Raskin, the only thing that we oppose is the reporting requirement. That's it. We don't want to make, what we have in the future is going to work. We didn't know, quite candidly, the Attorney General's office stopped prosecuting the cases. So that's the problem from there. Had we known, we would have picked it up. I've already had negotiations with Sergeant Lopez. We are now, meaning the associating, the state's attorney is going to start prosecuting those cases. So the cases will come to the gun squad, and this gun squad will then refer to the state's attorney's offices from there. But we don't want to write reports at the end of the year. We don't need a reporting requirement. The system is going to work because we worked so well together in the past. I can't justify why it didn't happen there. We just found out about it, and I can tell you quite candidly, Senator, we're going to make it work from there. I can't say how many we're going to do in the future, but I can tell you where each one's going to be looked at by the state's attorney in that particular jurisdiction where it happened. So we are against the reporting requirement and take no position on the bill at all. Thank you very much.